They call this episode The Impossible Box, but I don't see a TARDIS in sight. Hi, I'm Phil, welcome to my channel where I talk about all the geeky pop culture I like. I am currently doing weekly reviews of Star Trek Picard and we are up to episode 6, The Impossible Box. We're over the halfway mark now. So very quickly I'll give my general thoughts before going into the spoiler section, so if you haven't seen the episode you'll be okay for the first minute or two, and then I will give you a warning when I'm going to go into spoilers if you want to avoid those. This episode feels like one that launches us into the next phase of the series. We've kind of, I feel, had three different, well, we're about to go into the third phase, I think, of this series. First phase was very much the Earth set phase, the first 3 episodes. Lot of setup in that. Then we had the kind of bringing the team together phase, and now it kind of feels with the ending of this episode that we're launching into another phase, which is quite exciting. Especially this feels like it's the next phase on the Soji story as well, that has finally, after quite a lot of sort of little tidbits here and there, but it not really progressing at a massive pace, it feels like that storyline is now going to really start moving. Some have criticised the pace of this series so far, but for me, other than episode 2, which was really the only episode I had any problems with the pacing of, I've not really had a problem at all with the pacing of this series. I quite like the slower, more character-driven focus of it. This isn't an action series, this is very much a character-driven series where we're exploring not only Picard as a character, although that's obviously a big focus, but also his supporting cast as well. We're getting to see, elements of their personal lives and what makes them tick, and I really like that approach to this, that it's a very different approach to Discovery, for instance, which is very much about the action and the big plots. This is very much more character driven, and I'm quite liking it, but I know that's not a universal feeling. I know there are some people out there that have been critical of the pacing of this series, but I have not had any problems with it myself, and I don't have any problems with it in this episode. Like I said, I haven't had no problems with it. I had a little bit of problems with episode 2, which felt like it was all set up and there wasn't really anything exciting going on, but for every other episode there's been some really good stuff. And in this episode particularly, we do get some absolutely brilliant character stuff from Patrick Stewart playing Jean-Luc Picard. We get some delving into the sort of PTSD nature, which has been addressed before, both on The Next Generation and in the First Contact movie, the PTSD that he suffered from his time as Locutus of Borg. And it's really good that we're delving back into that again here, and we get some absolutely brilliant acting. I think it's played just right. The filming of it really adds to the height and heightens the sort of the kind of conveyance of the PTSD. It all works together to create some really compelling television. But it's not only Picard, we also get some other good stuff from Agnes in this episode, is a particular highlight as well. Just seeing how she has reacted and how she is reacting to the events of last week's episode. That's all good stuff as well. And then they're the two sort of, I'd say, main ones in terms of the crew of the ship. The other members of the crew get little bits here and there. We get a little bit from Rami, a little bit from Rios. Nothing major, but there are small things that I think are good for continuing character development in this as well. And there was also some really good cinematography in this episode, particularly in the very first opening scene, which I thought was shot brilliantly and was so atmospheric, and the way it was shot just conveyed the sort of tense feeling that the director obviously wanted us to feel. It looked beautiful, and it was very cinematic, but it also felt like it was done with a purpose and not just to be showy. It was done to serve a purpose in conveying what it needed to convey, and it did it very well. So overall, I thought this was a really good episode. I thought we got some absolutely, like I said, great character moments, and then at the very end we got a nice bit of action as well. This isn't an action series, like I said, but it does have little bursts of action which really sort of help give it moments where the what's the word? The sort of pace picks up a little bit, and that helps, and it really helps, I think, set up what I was talking about earlier with the next phase of this series going forward. So that's my non-spoiler bit of the review. Let's get to talking a bit more in depth about a little bit. So spoilers, if you haven't seen the episode, go away, watch it, come back, all that stuff. What did I think? So let's go back to Picard as well, because as I said, he's suffering here from PTSD when he has to go. Well, it first sort of shows itself when they're talking about the Borg before he goes onto the Borg ship, before the Borg cube, and he's getting angrier and angrier as people sort of suggest to him that, you know, these Borg aren't the same as the Borg, that, you know, they're not part of the collective anymore, they've been disconnected and things. And I felt in two ways about this, because at first his attitudes kind of struck me as a bit odd, because he has this attitude, and he says something along the lines of Borg don't change, and this is when he's gotten really angry. And that did strike me as a little bit odd, because he has seen that there have been several types of Borg that have changed. He's one of them. He left the collective and managed to regain, if not all, some of his humanity. And then he's met people like 7 of 9 who have done the same, and Hugh, who is in this episode. And he, in fact, that very episode, the very first episode where Hugh is in the Next Generation, where Picard initially wants to use him as a weapon against the Borg and infect him with something that will then transmit a virus to the rest of the collective and send him back to the collective in order to infect the whole collective. Picard's arc over that whole episode is him coming to realise that they're not all the same, and that they, you know, somebody can break away from the collective and is an individual. And that all seems to have gone out of the window a bit here. And at first that really kind of jarred with me, and I wasn't keen on it. And I've never suffered from PTSD, so I'm by no means an expert on this, but I imagine that this is just sort of a symptom of the PTSD. PTSD, I gather from my limited knowledge, you know, it's not logical. You anything can trigger your PTSD at any moment, and if it is triggered, logic probably goes out of the window. And I think that's probably what's happening here. Yeah, he does know people that have changed, that there are Borg that do change. And yet, despite the fact that he knows this, he still gets angry and comes out with that outburst because of the PTSD. It's actually quite a really good exploration of the topic of PTSD and trauma and triggers and things like that. And I think he plays it marvellously. And then, of course, following on from that, he boards the ship and he has a sort of anxiety panic attack over being on the ship. All, again, played absolutely brilliantly by Patrick Stewart. Helped immensely by the cinematography there and the editing choices and just how they framed that and mixed it in with some flashbacks to the Borg Queen and things like that. It all went in the boiling pot to create a really intense moment where you're on the edge of the seat wondering what's going to happen and really feeling for Picard at that moment. Then he's rescued by the lovely Hugh, and it was so nice to see this reunion with them. I fairly recently saw the first Hugh episode in my rewatch of The Next Generation. I haven't got to the second Hugh episode yet in my rewatch, but it was lovely to see them reunite, and I really like the fact that they didn't, because they could have so easily gone down there being a bit of animosity route between the two of them here, and I like the fact that they didn't do that. It was just a really touching moment, seeing them embrace, seeing them sort of the fondness for each other that they both have. The only downside to this is that it kind of made his mission maybe a little bit too easy. You know, he got the credentials, beamed aboard the ship, and immediately was with somebody who was willing to help him. You know, they didn't, up until the very end, didn't really come across any resistance there. So maybe it was a little bit too easy, his mission there. But it was a lovely moment between the two of them, and it was nice to see that. So let's talk a little bit about Soji and Narek. Their storyline has been building very slowly over the last 6 episodes. In fact, they weren't even in the last episode at all, which I think was a wise choice, actually. I think the episode last week really benefited from their absence because it allowed the focus to be solely on the plot that was happening last week. And there was a lot of stuff to get done last week. And the rest of the time it's been building very slowly, but I kind of like that because I think if we'd been hardly had anything with them so far, and then we'd been dumped into this scene here and this episode here with what was going on, it wouldn't have felt as earned, possibly. The scene between, when Narek has to, tries to kill her after he's gotten all the information he needs from her. That was a really, actually, quite good scene, and it was very subtle, but you could actually tell on Narek's face that it was a struggle for him, and he does actually, I think, have feelings for Soji, but his mission and his loyalty to his people has trumped those feelings, and there was there was just like this little moment when he was just left her in that room to die, that you could see on his face that he wished he kind of wished he didn't have to do that. So really nice acting from them there. And like I say, I like the fact that it was kind of built up slightly gradually over these episodes. Some possibly even too fast. There was one episode where I think, and yes, at this point he definitely was acting, but Narek was like, "I love you," and they'd only been sort of seeing each other for a couple of weeks or whatever at that point, and it all seemed very fast. But I think they did the best with that storyline in building it up gradually as what they could, and now we're into a new frontier for that. I think Narek's feelings for her are going to come back into play later on, but also her feelings of betrayal from him are also going to be a big factor in the rest of the series. PTSD wasn't really only explored with Picard either. It was kind of a theme throughout the episode, and particularly with Agnes as well, because last week she obviously killed Maddox, a man that we've been shown that she had a relationship with, and we have no reason to believe at the moment that relationship wasn't genuine and that she didn't genuinely have feelings for him. But she's seen something that made her feel that it was absolutely necessary to kill him. And we see the repercussions of that in this episode, and I think she plays it really well. In a completely different type of trauma to Picard, she's in a kind of daze, she doesn't know what she's, can't sleep, and in the end seeks, a couple of hours comfort in the arms of Rios. And I think, she plays that really well, and we got to see some really nice stuff from her as well. Talking of Rios, I have a theory about Rios. I'm going to keep it to myself for the moment. I might make a separate video on it at some point, but I have a theory about him. Watch this space. We do get some nice action at the end as well. They're being chased by Borg off the ship. Like I said, this isn't an action series, but it has these bursts of action which add a bit of oomph, a bit of energy to episodes, and I think where they come is quite good. Just having those little bursts of it doesn't need to be all the time. Mostly it's a character drama, but those little bursts of action really do help sometimes, and this episode helped, especially leading into the rest of the series, makes me feel like we're now into a new phase where we're probably, the next phase, however, is it going to last to the end? I don't know, but however long it lasts, the next phase of this series is kind of a chase. So the action was really good. I thought it was well shot. We got some high stakes, some cliffhangers. We don't know what's happened to a couple of characters. Hugh and... I've forgotten his name. Romulan guy with the sword. He's there on the Borg ship facing down a lot of Romulans. And I think they're probably going to be okay. The last thing we hear from them is the Romulan guy with the sword saying his line that he said to someone else, please choose to live. And that's the last we hear. I suspect they'll come out of that okay. I really hope they do, because I want to see more of him. And I definitely want to see more of Hugh as well. So I hope they both come out of that and meet up with the rest of the crew later on as well. If Hugh is dead, then I can't remember where I saw it. It might have been in the comment section. I can't remember if it was the comment section of one of my videos, somebody else's videos, or maybe it was on Twitter. But somebody had said somewhere that they were killing off all of the legacy characters, legacy supporting characters that were making guest appearances, and this person seemed quite angry about that. And at the time, I was quite dismissive about it. I don't think I was like, well, Data didn't die in this. He died in Nemesis. Maddox was a one-off character. You know, he's not really like someone that people have massive affection for. 7 and 9 is probably still alive, or is she? We don't know. But what I did think here was if Hugh dies here. And then something about the fact that they're now on the run from not the Tel Shiar, whoever the even more secret people are than the Tel Shiar. If they're on the run from them and they're heading to the Rikers next for a bit of, respite and to gather their thoughts and get a bit of help, I really hope that they don't show up and kill the Rikers. It's a possibility, but I really hope that doesn't happen. Because if they are, it feels like they're going to be chased from now on, and if they track them to where the Rikers are, who knows what will happen when they get there. If you've seen the Firefly movie, I'm kind of having in my head a horrible vision of like it being what happened to Book, the character of Book in that. And I really hope it doesn't go that route, but it just is something that popped into my head that might happen. Fingers crossed it's not. So overall, yeah, I enjoyed this episode. It was a solid episode. I thought there was some great character stuff in there. Bit of nice action at the end. Looking forward to what happens next. I think possibly even it might ramp up in terms of the action a little bit, but I hope they don't do that too much. Still want it to be very character focused. What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit that bell button if you're already subscribed so you get notifications and, all that jazz. And I will see you again for another review next week. Oh, and don't forget to check out my Doctor Who reviews, which I do every Sunday as well. It's the season finale this week of Doctor Who, so check out my review of that on Sunday. Bye.